Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the incredible craft work that goes into creating the Netflix series The Crown. We are joined today by Cate Hall, who is the head of department for hair and makeup. We have Martin Phipps, who's the music composer for the series, set decorator Alison Harvey, and casting director Robert Sterne. And Cate, in starting with you, it sounds like in terms of when you're looking at approaching a new season of this show, that you'll create all these lookbooks for yourself in kind of chronological order, and you'll find all photographs and resource materials, just so that you can track even the most minute of changes. Like, has this member of the family's hair grown a little bit? Has the color changed a little bit? And I was interested in how you go about just setting out the chronological research for yourself that you can then use visually throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just really geeky about it, and I make these kind of Bibles and print them because I think we need a kind of fast reference thing, basically. So I print all of these books and distribute them because the team is quite big. We're often on 2 units, so we need something concrete. And I think what I noticed is we use them loads at the beginning, and obviously we're fitting and we're developing the looks. And more and more and more, you just know the characters so well that I think you have this kind of the research just forms a gut instinct. And once you know it, then you're kind of set to abandon it in a way because you're like, you can feel whether something is Diana-ish or whether it's, Elizabeth-ish, whatever it is. I think the research is a brilliant springboard, but I think we'd all agree it's a springboard and that then we're trying to create something kind of living and breathing and three-dimensional. So I think although the details are really important, after a while we start to kind of we might know they're there, but we sort of abandon them.
Absolutely. And Martin, in terms of talking about the music composition, I love how there's kind of like these inflections of sounds that kind of give us that sense of the time period that we're in season by season, but it's not necessarily heavy-handed and at the foreground. It's not like when we were in the 80s that all of a sudden there was electronic music as the music composition for the show. And I was interested in looking at this final season, how you found those little details that would give the audience those very subtle senses of time and place.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Mara, that it's not about giving too much sense of the time and place. I mean, that's what the other departments are doing so beautifully. And I luckily sort of don't feel like I have to do that in the music. And actually often maybe even sort of playing against that or recalling stuff from the past or a different feeling from maybe from season 1 or 2 or 3 or recalling old melodies or sounds. So actually in the terms of kind of contemporizing it, I don't really do that in the music, and I didn't do it in the final season. It was very much, we were leaning into bagpipes and French horns again, and it wasn't a modern sound. And in fact, as the Queen kind of was looking to her own final chapter, it was it was more a nostalgic sound or something from calling from the past. So yeah, I was sort of grateful not to have to do that, actually.
I love that. And Alison, in terms of the set decoration, similar to what Cate was describing in terms of just like those research materials and building them out for themselves, I've heard you say that one of the things that you do is you get all of the Vogue front covers from the particular time period and also look very heavily at Architectural Digest and things like that. And how do those particular materials give you a real window and insight into how you're going to create the look and feel of a particular season of the show?
I think it's very similar to Cate. You have to sort of immerse yourself in the era as much as you can, and I find the Vogue fronts are very evocative because they're very sort of that moment, and we are sort of in the moment and back in time quite a lot. So we always set ourselves, we're never kind of on the nail decoratively. It's always a bit, everyone takes a little bit of time to kind of catch up with trends in interiors. So I tend to go back at least sort of 5 or 10 years so that it doesn't feel too on trend, I suppose, especially when you're going through the 60s and 70s. So and also because you're trying to combine classic aristocratic wealth, that is a bit like Martin was saying, a bit timeless, really. So you're contemporizing a little bit, but not too much. So when we're talking about more contemporary, so like the Middletons or something like that, which are kind of extremely middle class, bland. All our curtains, kind of some neutral tones, and that when you start to get into that decade, which we're in season 6, everything becomes far more homogenized in terms of the visuals. Everything becomes very dull actually, which is Middleton is great to kind of show that, because they represent a very sort of steady normality. But for everything else, all the research is invaluable. But again, you sort of immerse yourself in it and then does that feel like an appropriate environment, I suppose, for the character?
Definitely. And Robert, then when it comes to the casting, it's such a unique aspect because you essentially want to cast actors who can fully embody real people that the audiences in most cases are incredibly familiar with from being in the public eye for so long. But at the same time, you kind of want to make sure that it still feels like their interpretation, because the show is very much about the idea of what maybe goes on behind closed doors. And so how do you set about finding those little kind of nuances that you're looking for in the room of how they can potentially absorb themselves into the character, but also bring their own unique take to it?
Well, I think it's about giving the actors a load of different tools to play with. And some people respond very much to, the academic research about the characters. Some people respond to the idea of, the movement of the character or the look of the character. And I suppose what over the course of the seasons, like the whole team has been really brilliant at, is provided all these different, facilities for these actors to look at, and then giving them the opportunity to decide which ones work most usefully for them. So I suppose it's about creating an environment in which people can grab the things that are most useful for them to get to the end result that works for them. And that's different for everybody. And it's different for very experienced actors. And then you've got people who've never done any acting in their lives before, like the youngsters in it. Again, it's finding an environment, creating an environment in a room where people who've never done it to be free and creative and confident in front of a camera, whilst also portraying significant events in the lives of real life characters. And we kind of follow that. You have to provide them with things that they might find useful.
Absolutely. And, also in terms of resources that the show has, they have an incredible research department that really, come with swaths of it. And I imagine that one of the things might actually be looking at all of the research that you can potentially do for a show like this and finding how to whittle it down to what are actually the useful pieces of information.
Yeah, and sometimes people get overwhelmed by that. And, somebody might like, I don't want to read a load of books about it. I just want to imagine, a red setter, and then I'm going to run with that idea. And that kind of happens, but you've just got to just facilitate and enable the actor whatever they need to do it, and not impose anything on people, really, I suppose.
No, that's such a great point as well. And, I was interested for all of you in terms of that research element as well, and how you kind of find the specific areas that are going to be helpful to you and your teams, because you could sit there all day for weeks and months on end otherwise, just going through everything.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, the Paget report was a key example of a nightmare of research sort of content. I think it was like, I don't know, a 10,000-page report or something, which we had to try and work out what was relevant, what wasn't relevant, what we could actually really realistically try and copy, interpret, produce in the space of, with constraints of time and money. So that was a horrible bit of research. But, interesting.
I find, actors also will come having done their research because they're so excited about the role. And actually, sometimes what happens is an actor will come and they'll be like, listen, I know that their hairline is really oddly shaped, and I know that their nose bends here, and I've looked at this in the eyebrows. And sometimes it's a case of saying, okay, well, we'll try everything, because we're open-minded and it's a process. But actually, in my experience, because I have to commission a wig, and obviously I can't really just try a £5,000 wig and then not get it right. In my experience, things like precise details of hairlines, you think theoretically that that's going to really sell a character. But actually what you're trying to find is this bastard love child between the actor and the role, and just precisely mimicking all the details in the research just creates something totally fake. But yeah, so my feeling is that although the research is really useful, the skill really is in working with the actor to figure out which of the details are useful and which are actually just creating this kind of weird parody look, because we're not making lookalikes. And I think this is the real thing. So for us, we focus on the shape and the silhouette and then we tried to, and the kind of the texture and the tone. So like Elizabeth Debicki's tan, that felt a really important detail, you know, that the depth of that sort of 90s tan. But actually the shape of her nose isn't really going to sell the idea that she's Diana, I don't think, you know.
No, that makes sense. And Martin, also in talking a little bit more about the music in the show, what I love is that, you know, especially looking at the final season, you're able to really build on the foundation of everything that's been built for seasons before, because there's certain sounds that you can use that the audience have kind of heard elements of in previous seasons or previous scenes that evoke that sense of, okay, you know, now we're in the Queen's world, now we're in this world, now this is kind of the landscape of feeling and emotion based on the narrative. And so in creating music for this final season, how did you want to also look at the foundation of everything that was already previously built into the show?
Well, Peter Morgan was sort of quite clear that he didn't want anything radically new for the final season. And it was very much about bringing all the elements together and coming full circle and sort of rounding it off like that musically. I mean, the French horn is just, he had this phrase that he said it was like when she put on her sort of her duty hat on, you heard the French horn, and it was the sort of the weight of her office, and the loneliness of it, that solo sound of the French horn playing, I think really beautifully captured that the Queen's central role in that, and at the heart of it, and the weight of her office. And another thing that he often talked about, which we sort of kept going throughout, was a sense of suppressed power in the music. So it was never in your face. It never got very loud. It never got sort of particularly grand, but you felt that there was a sense of power bubbling underneath with a lot of the scenes, and he wanted that in the music, and that's something very much we kept going. These sort of muted power chords underneath the scenes and some of the action. So yeah, that was very much the approach we kept going with on the final season.
It's so great. And Robert, also with the casting, you know, there's such a unique aspect that you're not just casting roles in a series, you're also casting actors who are coming into a show and connecting to a previous actor's performance and embodiment of that same person as well. And I was interested in how that informs the way that you're approaching auditioning and kind of what you're looking for in people when they come into the room.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you've got to keep in mind who played it last and what qualities they brought to it, and because you've got to bear that in mind, because there's going to be a baton that's passed over. But you're also thinking about where this person is at this new stage in their life in this particular decade, and also what's happening in the script and what that's doing. And it's all swimming around in the middle of there somewhere, really.
No, that absolutely makes sense. And Kate, in talking a little bit more about some of the hair, I love the fact that you had Princess Margaret's actual hair person giving you a masterclass at one point and kind of telling you some of like the tips and tricks of how the royal family do their hair. And I was just interested in some of the details that really helped you bring to the show.
Yeah, I think it was just a fantastic experience, because in and amongst this masterclass, and you know, this guy's he was Princess Margaret's hairdresser in the 1970s, so he would fly to Mystique with her. So he would be dropping anecdotes left, right, and center. And at one point, he got out her hair pieces, which he actually hired to me so I could use them in season 3. And you know, some color samples which actually have faded, so whilst they weren't sort of like technically super useful, there was a real feel from talking to him about what she was like, what she liked, what she didn't like, and I just think all of that richness of information and character can't help but feed in to the process, you know. So one of the things that was really fantastic was we obviously are quite kind of, you know, I guess quite elaborate with all of our electrical equipment and our wigs, and we take it all very seriously, and it takes hours. And then he comes in with this comb and basically goes back combs living daylights out of this woman's hair, and then just sort of folds the hair masterfully into this shape. And we were all astounded by him. He was brilliant. So when we were dressing Leslie's wig for season 6, you know, actually we used to call it the microphone, because we stripped loads and loads and loads of weight out of it, so there was hardly anything left. If you saw it wet, you'd think it was a man's wig. And then we backcombed it, and we backcombed every single inch of it into this kind of frothy, the texture was like, it was sort of semi translucent all the time. So from different angles, you could always see light through it. And that was very much inspired by our wonderful masterclass with Joseph.
It's so great. And Alison, one of the other unique aspects for you is, you know, usually when you're creating spaces around characters, and particularly a place that they live, there's so many details of, you know, what are the clothes that are left over here? What's the item on the coffee table? But this is so different because you have the royal family with staff who are there present the entire time, even when they're in their private home, and people who are constantly going behind them, picking things up and tidying and organizing. And I love the detail of how you thought their desks would be their kind of private personal space that the staff wouldn't necessarily touch. And so you could weave certain details into that. And I was interested in how you landed upon that choice and what some of the details you enjoyed bringing into that little corner were.
Oh, well, it's just a kind of, it's the kind of little kind of set deck playground, really. It's where you kind of put all your nice sort of your lunatic ideas that no one's ever going to notice. So, you know, they all had elements that, I mean, that did come originally from Prince Charles, who apparently did say to everybody, don't come near my desk. And when you look at all the photographs of everyone's desk, I mean, there's a photograph of Margaret's desk, which was absolutely piled high with knickknacks and random sort of souvenirs. And it just, for her, she was like obsessed with blue, apparently. So she's got to have a lot of blue things on her desk. Charles has all books about horticulture, organic gardening, vegetable growing, ancient architecture, Palladian architecture, you know, weird sort of archaeological finds that anyway, so he had that as a bit of kind of I felt that he always wanted to be a kind of intellectual, but he was never allowed to be an intellectual. So his desk was sort of an intellectualization of his role. Diana was quite kind of childlike in what she had on her desk. You know, she had kind of sort of toys. There's a reference of her sofa at Kensington Palace, which is absolutely covered in cuddly toys. So she was always kind of quite childlike and quite sort of innocent and naive in what we had on her desk, and sort of quite sort of romantic, I suppose. Yeah, so they all had areas that were the Queen, again, you know, the obvious corgis and horses, and you know, the WI, you know, things that we know that they had. I mean, it's difficult to sort of, you don't want to put things on a desk that you don't feel would be justifiable. So it has to come from some sort of research. I mean, I read the whole of Camilla's and Charles's biography, hoping to find something about Camilla, but it really was quite hard. I just tried really hard. She was quite kind of enigmatic in her sort of, you know, she's not of, you know, everyone said she really liked reading and, you know, country pursuits, but apart from that and a bit of horticulture was pretty, I don't know, just there wasn't a kind of interesting nugget that I could play with there. I did try. But, you know.
They're such great details. And Robert, with the casting as well, you know, it's so remarkable when you step back and you look at the fact that there's easily a couple hundred characters each season on the page. And I was interested in just kind of your process and what your starting point is as you're going through script by script and just creating these character breakdowns and really just figuring out how you're going to approach looking at people for so many roles for a season.
Well, just the sheer scale of it. Well, you just start, you put your head down and get on with it, and you start with the big ones and then keep going, and it kind of rolls on through as it's shooting. So it's not all done before the season's shooting, and you keep at it and hope you don't get stuck, is what happens.
Did you have people in the final season that you had seen for projects that were outside of The Crown that you'd seen for other things, where you just suddenly
of course, you'll see people all the time for different things, and everybody feeds in, and then you got to work out where you think people might fit best, and you talk to Peter. Peter's really brilliant about giving time to talk about how he really sees each part. So you take a lot of it from the script, but then you get on the phone with Peter and he'll just really, you know, he'll riff a bit about the character and what, you know, what it's supposed to be and the function of it and how he sees them. And then you go away and think about people, you know, who might fit that brief, and, you know, see if they respond to that character, and, you know, see and see what kind of fits. But yeah, it's a number when you first start the season. You've got 300 to do, but yeah.
It's pretty remarkable. And Martin, you know, you were talking earlier about some of the sounds that you kind of found towards the end of the season, in particular, you know, the bagpipes. And because you start working with the script versus waiting for rough cuts once they've actually filmed a lot of the scenes, I was interested in how you kind of start digging in and really figuring out what some of the unique elements are going to be that you're going to bring throughout the season that, you know, you don't necessarily have the footage in front of you at that point to build it upon.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, just talking to Peter and hearing him talk about the characters and the tone of it. There were sort of two things in season 6. There was the bagpipes, which came from Sleep Dearie Sleep, which I'm guessing was written into the script. I mean, I know it must have been because they shot the whole scene with with pipes coming in and playing it to the Queen. And then he was like, "Look, we've got this in there. Go away and play with it. Do something with it. You know, extend it." And he wasn't thinking of it for the end, but I went away and wrote a piece around it and extended it, and then that became the ending. Another thing was we had this drum sound which came out of, which I sampled actually from the original footage of Mohammed Al Fayed's wedding back in season 5, and which I'd sort of developed, and it became this. I took one small element to it, and it became the insistent sound that was kind of driving Mohammed Al Fayed on to push Dodi to make this thing happen in Paris. And it kind of became this sound. It's under the sort of chase, the big paparazzi chase to the Ritz from the villa. Can't remember what it's called, villa something. That's it. Thank you. It became this sort of weird, insistent sound, and it's quite subtle, but it really. I think once you know it's there, it really has a power, and it's, even if you don't, I think it's this sense of something behind the scenes driving the action a bit, and that was something I think worked well.
And for all of you, I also just wanted to ask about, you know, reflecting on the experience of working with Peter Morgan as a creator, because he's obviously been living and breathing the entirety of this story and this family for so many years at this point. And so I was interested in how he really kind of works collaboratively with all of you to really set you up for success and to do your best creative work on a show like this.
I think in casting, it's a real gift for a casting person to have somebody who will actually spend time talking through and really giving you loads of detail about it and answer any questions, and just talk about how he sees these people, and it really gives you, you know, so much to go and play with. So it's been a big part of the job. It's been really brilliant for the casting side of it.
And how about for the rest of you?
It's kind of almost the opposite for me, actually, because I have the gift of Peter mainly just leaves me alone, and you know, it's all in the script really, and visually in the research. And then we work with the actors, and then of course, once there's something to see and once there's something to talk about, what I love about him is he will only get involved if he thinks there's a problem. So I think I've only had two phone calls with Peter for notes in the kind of 5 years, but they were so brilliant. So that my favorite note that I got from him was when we were developing the Thatcher look with Gillian. And, you know, I was quite pleased with how it was going. And he obviously saw some fitting photos, and he called me one evening and he said, "Kate, you know, you're judging her, like you're bringing all of your childhood to this process. And what we're talking about is actually a woman in 1979 with all of this potential, who's about, you know, she's kind of just landing on the world stage, and she hasn't yet committed any of the crimes that you're bringing to this character." And it was so perfect, this note, and of course that was what we needed actually to then relook at what we were doing. And it was like he was totally right. It was exactly what was happening. But yeah, so I have sort of only absolutely necessary contact with Peter, but when I have it, it's been invaluable.
What about for you, Alison?
I don't think I've ever had a conversation with him. He doesn't really know. I don't think he knows really quite the difference between what Martin as production designer does and I do as set decorator. So I think he may have talked to Martin. Yeah, but I mean, I said the same as Kate. I think, you know, I think you'd find out if he wasn't happy. And by the time it comes to us, there's a certain amount of development on the page and in the character. So, you know, hopefully we just enhance and elaborate on what's on the page.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to the music for you, Martin?
Go on, Kate, if you want to.
Oh, sorry.
Interject with Ali. I think most people don't know the difference between what you do and what Martin
Fair
does.
I mean, for me, it was the same kind of thing that no news was often good news, you know, in terms of, and especially as the seasons progressed, and the music would just appear in the cuts and be on scenes, and I'd sort of go to Peter, you you like it, and he goes, yeah, it's perfect, and if it's in there, he's happy, you know. So, but I kind of it was gold dust having time with him and talking about the characters, and yeah, I really savored those moments. I mean, he's got such a great turn of phrase about, he can sort of nail a mood or an idea in just a little, you know, a pebble in the shoe, or as I say, suppressed power, or something, you know, something. Or I remember in season 3, he said, this episode is like a color chart. We want to start off rosy pink and end up blood red at the end, and your music's got to do the same thing right throughout the episode, in changing in tone and color right through. And you know, that stuff is really valuable. And I just had, I don't want to sound too sycophantic, but I had such faith in that, even when he rejected stuff, that he knew, I never lost faith that he knew what he was talking about, and that he was right in the end and I was wrong. So, you know, that's a really good thing as a composer, because, you know, you want to have faith in the person who's judging you. So, yeah, that was great.
Definitely. Well, I absolutely love all of the immense details that have gone into all of your work on the show. So congratulations on an amazing final series, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.